stuff. And we will recognize Jeff when he joins. So shall we get started? Let's do it. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, the Mason District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all the other members. Accordingly, I am going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. Okay, let me talk the roll call. Robert Chamberlain.
Hey, Marty. Robert Chamberlain here, live and direct from Alexandria in Fairfax County.
Welcome. Joshua Booth.
Joshua Booth here in Lincolnia.
Welcome, Joshua. Jeff Longo. Jeff. Okay. Dave Nguyen. Dave. Donna Jacobson.
Donna Jacobson from Annandale, Virginia.
Welcome, Donna. William Likos.
William Likos, Falls Church, Virginia.
Welcome, Bill. Ed Feig.
Ed Feig, Annandale, Virginia.
Welcome, Ed. Vinod Gupta. Vinod. Not here yet. Jan Keys.
Jan Keys at home in Falls Church, Virginia.
Welcome, Jan. Karen Geyer Smith.
Karen Geyer Smith in Fairfax, Virginia.
Welcome, Karen. And I'm Marty Machowski calling in from my home in Falls Church. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to Karen, co-chairman, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Mason District SSPA Task Force. So moved.
There's a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Jan, or that was Donna?
Yeah.
And do I hear any discussion? All in agreement, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of a task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Track a Plan Amendment page to the SSPA website at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/plan-development/SSPA/track-plan-amendment, or by calling 1-844-621-3956, that's TTY 711, and entering the access code 2337-510-4826. It is so moved.
There's a motion on the, thank you, that was Dawn. That's okay. Do I hear any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously, and I believe Jeff just showed up.
I did. Sorry, sorry I was late.
Just, Jeff, just for the record, state your name and where you're calling in from.
Jeffrey Longo calling in from Seven Corners area of Falls Church.
Thank you. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Mason District SSPA Task Force's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Ed beat you this time, Donna. And any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye or raising hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And motion again passes unanimously, and I will throw the gavel back to you, Marty.
Thank you, Karen. Michael, you want to just review the agenda for us?
And Michael's on mute.
You would think I hadn't done this before. Apologies. I didn't have it in front of me, but I can walk down the items tonight. We wanted to spend just a few minutes responding to some of the questions and feedback that we heard last week in review of the transportation analysis. I have Sean Schweitzer and Tom Burke from FCDOT to provide some additional information. Afterwards, we'll dive into the plan recommendations for First Christian Church. If you haven't already, send me a quick message and I can make sure I forward a copy of that to you. And we'll continue from there. I will note quickly that if you are a member of the public joining, the agenda does not specify a time for public comment, but we will allow for public comment after staff's presentation, after the task force has had a chance to discuss. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everyone. So I just wanted to touch base on some of the outstanding comments and questions that we received last week regarding the transportation analysis presentation. So kind of going over some of the questions that came up, and I'll have Mike put up the table regarding the First Christian Church driveway counts, trip generation. As he's doing that, some of the question was, I guess, the comparison between using seats as a variable instead of square footage, and so also regards to the mosque as well, using square footage. We used the seats for the First Christian Church because it's the standard way of calculating trip generation for the churches when using ITE, the trip generation. The less standard option of using square footage would have minimal trip difference, as we'll show on the screen here. So you can kind of see what the driveway counts were, which were observed, compared to the trip generation that the ITE came up with, which we showed last week. So you can kind of see at the top, it says the driveway counts, and then below that is existing is what we used to generate what would be existing for the First Christian Church in the AM and the PM peak hour. So you can kind of get the observed and what was used last week. So you can kind of see in the gray box below where it says comparison, just kind of gives you the difference between using the square footage and seats a little bit. So you can kind of see that it's very minimal when you're using it. But again, the standard practice for churches is to use the seats. So I kind of wanted just to reiterate that and kind of show you what came out of that, because I believe that some people wanted to see the driveway counts as well. And then moving on, another question that we had, and I'll ask Mike again to show the trip or the difference between the seats comparison and the square footage. Sorry, that was the second part of that question. So I don't know if you have that too. Is that the one? Yeah, existing seats. Okay, so yeah, again, you can kind of see the difference between using seats and square footage. Again, very minimal when looking at the AM and the PM peak hour. So again, just wanted to reiterate that using seats didn't drastically change the outcome of what was used in last week's presentation. So moving on, this, I think the second one was, this is more so just a reiteration regarding the clinic space that's being used in the church currently and what the proposed site would show. So the clinic space from the church will be moved to the proposed site and will continue assisting community members who currently receive free clinic services and in a more improved and more appropriate setting in the new building. And so that space in the church will just go back to be being utilized by the church for standard practice. The third one was we had discussion on the missing sidewalk in front of the Chateau condominiums. And so I kind of reached out to staff and kind of tried to come up with some more information regarding that that missing piece of sidewalk. So I believe a couple of years ago, the county, Fairfax DOT had built the trail across the church and also rebuilt the bus stop shelter right at the intersection of Patrick Henry Drive and Route 7. And as they were doing that, they were looking at that gap in sidewalk in front of the Chateau condominium complex. What came out of that, review, there were some design issues that the county encountered when looking into the implementation, more of a engineering complexity in regards to space and funding. Just also wanted to note that this is not part of the First Christian Church site, but we, as the county, will continue to look at this moving forward. I would most likely say that this would probably be looked at when we're looking at the BRT phasing and be reviewed when we're looking at right-of-way needs for the BRT. And then the other question was the pedestrian crossings from, I guess, Church of Christ across from the Islamic Center. And after talking with staff and SAFE, we kind of came up with some more details about that. We learned that the service times for the mosque is 11 a.m., 12:15, and 1:30. These times are outside of the peak hour and peak period, where the background traffic along Route 7 is most intense. The proposed site development of the mosque would expand existing parking to accommodate more parking on site, which would in turn lessen the pedestrian traffic crossing Route 7 during service times and the amount of people parking off site. We also talked to SAFE about pedestrian crossings and observed in the 4-hour period of when the service is in session or services are in session, there was a total of 98 pedestrians crossing Route 7 between 10:30 and 2:30 p.m., which kind of comes out to be a maximum of 35 pedestrians crossing Route 7 in an hour. And I'll have Michael pull up the trip generation for the, yes. Is it the driveway counts? It's at the lower table. They've already seen the one up top from last week. So this one kind of shows specifically the mosque when it's in session in the Friday AM and PM peak hours. This is usually towards the afternoon, so the sessions or the services aren't really in session at that point, but kind of gives you the trip generation of what is existing right now, and then what the proposed site development would look like with 5,000 extra square feet of mosque. And you can kind of see the difference between the existing and proposed is, again, kind of very minimal in impact in regards to the AM and PM peak hours. Again, this is not when the service is in session. So we can kind of see just the impact there. And again, I don't know if Mike wants to, we will also be, looking more in depth at the Islamic Center, I believe in January, to kind of discuss a little bit more the specifics of that development as well. So we'll bring this up again. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate and kind of give you some more specifics that we kind of found out between last week and now, and kind of just give you that information.
Any questions or comments on that additional?
Yeah, I just wanted to that last bit for the mosque. Did I read that footnote right? That information is just based off of one survey that was performed. So is it right in saying that that's the IT code that's a less solid area of the IT code? It's less surveyed, I guess.
Yes, yeah, there's not too much data on mosques in the trip generation, but that's what we have. So that's unfortunately what we have to use.
And that's why we use the church as kind of a surrogate land use for the mosque. Their estimates.
Okay.
I have a question. When was the survey taken? Within the last month?
So for the one case study?
For the mosque, yeah, for the foot traffic.
The foot traffic,
Last Friday.
Last
was it
Friday.
last Friday? Okay, last Friday.
Last Friday, not during the Ramadan. Okay, good. All right, thanks.
It was taken during Friday prayers, which is the high traffic time for mosque usage. So it's taken during all three services.
Thank you.
Let me ask about, maybe I missed this in the presentation, the 3,800 square feet in the church that magically disappeared in the first analysis. Have you accounted for that at all in this analysis, or is that the same?
That would just, again, the clinic would move over into the new proposed site. So then that function would return back to what the church would like to use it for in the church capacity. So it's
So it's assumed that it doesn't generate, that 3,800 square feet doesn't generate any traffic.
So that's what we use the square footage for. So you can kind of see we used, including the existing church and the clinic that's inside that church, is 27,500 square feet. So we were showing you the difference between just using the seats and then what the whole existing building is. And so we were that was the very minimal change in trips. It generated maybe a couple more trips in the AM and the PM, but nothing really, eye-catching or drastic.
Okay.
But the 3,800 square feet is going to go back to the church, and it would not be used as clinic. So,
Right, I understand that, but it presumably might be used for something. Yeah. Okay.
Is it fair to say, Tom or Sean, that space, the magical space, as the chairman refers to it, is now accounted for in its trip generation through the numbers assigned by the per seat analysis, which is standard for all churches, which also have some other kind of, obviously, ancillary space that may not be seating?
So the trip generation studies for churches assume that, in addition to seats, there's, like you said, there's other supporting uses within the church, gathering, like standing room, maybe room for children, any number of other uses. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but we did.
Well, and you are, but in this case, the 3,800 that's in question is covered in
Yeah,
those assumptions.
because we did an alternative trip generation where we used
Square
the
footage was, yeah, so
And-
square footage, the total was used, which is 27,500, and that includes the existing
Right.
church with the clinic in there.
and the results were very close.
Thank you.
And if the church were to, in sometime in the future, come back to the county with a proposed use for that space, childcare, Head Start, whatever, some community-focused use, you would then do an analysis at that point in time to understand what the traffic generation was.
They do an analysis at that time. Yeah, our zoning evaluation group would evaluate a special exception or variance depending on whatever type of use they were proposing.
Right. And is there anyone on the call from the church who can gaze into the future for us and at least answer the question as if the churches will entertain new potential uses for that space?
It's just too early to know. We don't know. I mean, at the moment, that would become ancillary church space, and beyond that, we can't second guess that.
Okay. I don't know if there's any more questions. If there aren't any other questions, send it back to Mike.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Sean and Tom, for the update. Marty, if it's okay with you, we'll go ahead and get started, jump into staff
Sure.
presentation.
Sure.
See if I can enable my screen once more. And are you all seeing the full presentation or are you seeing the notes?
The notes.
Notes. All right. How's that?
That's the full presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. So tonight we wanted to take a little time to talk through the staff's draft recommendation and plan text language that we shared on yesterday. We apologize that it came out just the day before, but it's still it's still going through some of its review. And so your feedback tonight, I think, will be warranted. If you all, and this is on the agenda as well, if the task force feels comfortable, you're in a position providing a general up or down vote on the amendment, you are welcome to do that tonight. We will continue to revise the plan text as we move forward. So that's just an FYI. We'll have some room for a task force discussion about each of these items as well. And then, as I mentioned, we have the task force recommendation if you so choose. So really quickly, I just wanted to give folks, particularly those who may be joining for the first time, maybe aren't completely familiar with how the comprehensive plan process works. We provide draft policy text that we use and our elected officials use to help review future development proposals. So comprehensive plan amendments don't approve the proposals specifically, but they are important in establishing the framework for how we are to consider it. And it's useful in helping staff to identify key considerations such as we've discussed here, stormwater, whether that's this proposal or any future proposal on this site. As a quick reference, an example, this is a brief snippet of example plan text that's also found in the B5 Barcroft Community Planning Sector. If you wanted some good some nightly reading and you just were eager to read the comprehensive plan, you can slide to page 200 and see some of the recommendations in the area. We provide the site location, which is identified here under number 1 in our recommendation. This is the area for which the plan option applies. We have the plan option itself. It identifies what types of uses the county is willing to consider above or on top of the baseline use. And then there may be subsequent conditions. They don't always apply to the plan options, but oftentimes we'll have additional bullets. And you'll see that in the recommendations that we'll provide shortly. So really quickly, generally based on the analysis that we've conducted to date, both in terms of land use analysis, feedback that we've received from schools, from public facilities, from parks, etc. We are generally supportive of the proposed use, which is the affordable housing, and the proposed intensity, which is around 113 affordable housing, age-restricted affordable housing units. In doing so, if we were to move forward with that recommendation, we would apply certain conditions for any consideration of this use on the First Christian Church property, which we'll walk through now. I will briefly note as well that the plan language that we include as a part of the area plans is in conjunction or on top of our existing policy recommendations that are found throughout the policy plan section of the county's comprehensive plan. So it's in addition to, not a replacement of, all of the other longstanding policies that we would expect any development to adhere to. Really quickly, this is the location of the recommended amendment to the plan. It can be found on page 202. It would be item number 6 if you were following along in the chronological order under the recommendations land use section. This is the general site location that I mentioned before, tax map parcel 51-3, double circle 125, which is the First Christian Church site for the approximately 115 affordable multifamily residential units. We have received some feedback about the 115 units. In our analysis, we rounded up, but I think we've heard from the church and from a few members in the community that had some questions about why this went up to 115. I think we're open to the 113 number, or if the church had a suggested number, we would work with them on that. But there's some flexibility. We did evaluate, to be conservative, a higher number. So that'll help with the analysis. Some of the feedback that we had, and this pertains to bullet number 1, related to building scale. And we heard different things about building scales over the course of the past 3 or 4 task force meetings and in the comments that we've received. On the one hand, there's definitely appreciation for what we would consider a smaller footprint, for us to be mindful of any new development and the amount of impervious surface that could be created. But there's also an understanding that we want to be aware of the height and the visual impacts that any new development could have on this portion of the corridor. We heard that there are concerns about the existing screening, how that might be impacted. And so there's a balance that would need to be struck. So our bullet here is to note, if this were to move forward for review, that visual impacts to adjacent residential neighborhoods should be minimized through building and site design, including appropriate transition in both height and scale. And so staff would expect the applicant, in this case First Christian Church, to demonstrate some responsiveness to this concern. Likewise, buffering and screening, as I mentioned briefly on the previous bullet, that there would be some additional impact to the existing wooded areas on the First Christian Church property. And so we would expect, both in terms of providing some sort of visual and auditory buffer, that any new development would take a look at screening and supplement existing buffer areas with the appropriate deciduous and understory vegetation to provide that visual screening year round. This includes light pollution, which I know was a key point mentioned by the Ravenwood Park Homeowners Association, whether that's from lights in the parking lot itself or from cars parking in the parking lot, that there would be some attention to minimizing those impacts, particularly to adjacent residential neighborhoods. Fairfax County Park Authority noted in their comments to us and in our presentation that I think we made back in September that they would like to see some level of on-site amenities or that would serve the age-restricted nature of the residents. We know that park space in the Mason District, particularly in this in the Bailey's planning sector, is strained. And so they're looking for additional ways to provide that. And so any opportunity to provide space on site is encouraged. Tree preservation. I know we talked before about the wooded areas, particularly as it relates to buffering and screening, but also just tree preservation in and of itself for its environmental benefit. UFMD, or the Urban Forest Management Division, would expect that the existing mature tree canopy be preserved to the extent possible, and that land disturbing activities are managed to minimize the risk for damaging trees in buffer areas. And then, of course, stormwater, which we know is top of mind, particularly to folks living in the Ravenwood Park community downstream from the site. There was a very explicit request for us to address the additional stormwater runoff that would be generated from any new impervious surface created on the site in a manner that would not exacerbate or add to existing flooding events in the community. I'll read this through, and when we get into the discussion, what I'll do is turn things over to two of our environmental coordinators and staff we have joining us tonight, both Katie Herman, who is with our Environmental and Development Review Branch in the Department of Planning and Development, and Katie Torgerson, excuse me, Katie, who is with DPWES stormwater management, or stormwater planning, excuse me. So the bullet reads, stormwater management controls above the minimum standard should be provided to reduce runoff to good forested conditions, which we'll talk about, to the greatest extent possible to help mitigate downstream flooding. These stormwater quantity and quality control measures should be provided with the goal of minimizing downstream flood risk, reducing the total runoff volume, and/or significantly delaying its entry into the stream system. Reduction of impervious surface and green storm water infrastructure, or GSI, should be prioritized over conventional stormwater management practices. And there's an additional bullet that speaks to some of the work that Katie Torgerson mentioned in our environmental meeting, which is identifying additional measures that can be taken to partner with the county to provide that support. And I think that's the last of our bullets before we transition into some other matters. But I'll stop there, Marty, and turn it back over to you in the task force for
Thank you. I have a number of questions, but let's start off on this slide. And per your mention, Michael, could Katie, one of the Katie's, help us understand the good forested conditions language, where that came from and what that means in real terms?
Sure. This is Katie Herman, and I will try to tackle that for you all, and we can take the discussion from there. But just to, make sure that we take a step back and understand, how the county is looking at the potential redevelopment, new development at this site. So our regulatory requirements will not allow for an increase in flows for the 2-year and the 10-year events. Where there is existing structural flooding downstream, the county also requires no increase in the 100-year storm peak flow rate. So with that being said, we have two solutions that are shown here on the slide as we can see them. One that we're going to talk about here is related to this good forested condition. And essentially what that means is that future stormwater management designs would need to start from a base of a pre-development wooded condition. And then the future stormwater management measures would mimic runoff release rates from a forested site. So we recommend focusing on using the term good forested condition because it reflects a land cover type that is quantifiable and also understandable. Sometimes when we talk about different stormwater, different flooding storm events, like 10-year, 2-year, 50-year, that can be sometimes confusing because those events are fluctuating over the course of time and their intensity can change. So that is the good forested discussion that we wanted to convey, and we can answer further questions. And I just wanted to also mention though real quick that second bullet is really the intent there that, you know, the county may explore partnering with an applicant to reduce flows from larger storm events above and beyond the regulatory requirements. So one more piece to go back to the good forested condition. Again, that's assuming a pre-developed wooded condition where the future stormwater management measures would mimic runoff release rates from a forested site. So if we can imagine the parcel in question being forested, obviously a lot of the water in a typical rain event would infiltrate down through the topsoil into the lower layers of a soil. But there, you know, at some level there would be a point where that soil, that natural environment soil would become saturated and there would be some natural runoff. And so the good forested condition really is, for this particular site, our strong recommendation for as a reference. So I hope that helped.
Okay, let me just ask a couple quick questions, and on this matter, I'll ask other task force members if they have questions. So the phrase "good forested conditions" is good somewhere on a scale? Are there poor forested conditions, excellent and fair forested conditions? What does that mean? You know?
Yeah. So
So,
yes. Oh,
do you,
go ahead,
you want me to
Katie.
respond?
Sure, go ahead.
So it's, you know, all when you design stormwater management facilities, it's all based off of land cover. And there are several methods that you can use, but they all refer to, so you can have a poor forested site where you have like poor soils and, you know, good forested mean it's the best of the types of forested you can have. And there are several tables that people refer to. So just to make it clear, we're not talking about a forest on poor hydrologic soils where there's no infiltration. We're talking about like a good stand of trees with the assumption that, you know, basically the best that you could have, you know, in a pre-development condition.
So good is best, excellent isn't better.
No.
Okay.
It only goes up to good.
Okay, fair enough. Are there other task force members who have questions on this particular language?
I do.
Good.
So you seem to be alluding to the fact that there might be a specific metric that you have, like good forested conditions. So for a you know, an area of, you know, so many square feet, you know, do you have a metric of how many you know, inches per hour of rainfall that area, you know, a good forested area should be able to absorb?
Yes, and that is what all stormwater calculations are based on. So they take that land cover and it has an associated runoff, what they call runoff coefficient, so an associated amount of runoff that would come off of it. And so what we're saying is when they go and do those calculations, they need to assume a land cover that's good forested, and that dictates what type of runoff that would generate.
Okay, so my question. So you do have a metric that's backing it.
Yes, yes, and that's why it's a technical term, but it refers back to a standard for how we calculate stormwater management requirements.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
I have a question.
Donna?
Yeah. And the task force originally recommended that the new stormwater management system either retain and manage stormwater on site and or deliver the stormwater to the system east and north of the property. How does that compare to what you are suggesting be done?
Well, maybe I can tackle the discussion of moving or sending water elsewhere off-site, and that is something that typically the county does not do, and it's not something that we would necessarily advocate for, because of the location of this site is kind of at the top of some of the sub-watersheds. It would require sending water over into a different subshed, so it wouldn't flow down through to Lake Barcroft. It would have to go over to 4 Mile Run, which is a completely different watershed that's also fairly degraded. And Katie, I don't want to completely speak from you on the stormwater planning side, but I think that is something that we wouldn't recommend at this point.
Katie, doesn't some of the water from the site currently go to 4 Mile Run?
I think there's a very small portion, so we wouldn't want to send more than
but there is water currently going from that site into 4 Mile Run.
I can look at the drainage map right now to confirm, but I think that generally the regulations like you to keep water within the same drainage area and not break.
Well, let me pick up on Bill's comment, and it's my understanding, based on my recent conversations with the engineering firm and with Aaron Vincent in particular, is that the site is 6.84 acres, and 1.71 acres of that 6.84 drain to 4 Mile Run. That's
25%.
25%. And at a minimum, that would have to be maintained at a minimum.
And I think that's generally the practice, is that you maintain the drainage paths that are currently there and not break. In this case, you'd be breaking a whole watershed. So
right.
I think that's
let me also raise at this point another, and task force members have probably heard me say this a couple of times, and I will have to tell you that my numbers were wrong, as I learned last night as well. There are 4 outflows from the site. 2 of those outflows, which come down into Ravenwood Park and through our yards here, are operating at 130% capacity during a 10-year storm. I had said 100%. It's actually, according to the more recent conversation I had with Aaron, 130%. The one outfall that goes to 4 Mile Run, what we're talking about, operates just under 100%, and the final outfall, which goes down Sherrill Drive, operates at about 85%. So,
hey Marty, this is Aaron. Is it okay if I jump in just very briefly on two of the things we've been talking about, and it may not be my point, so feel free to tell me to be quiet because I know.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, two things. The 130%. I don't want people to construe that as hard engineering fact. I think we were talking more in terms of generalities, with the primary point being that the stormwater system is overtaxed. So I think that would be my main takeaway, not the exact percentage. And then secondly, I just wanted to add that the conversation around good forested conditions is a very aggressive target, but it's also a very broad target, and there are a lot of different ways to meet that target. So we've talked about diverting runoff from Ravenwood Park direction toward 4 Mile Run, and that is something that we are going to continue to explore. And I also agree with what staff has said, that the county's ordinances discourage that, and so we would have an uphill battle there, but it's something we want to look at. I guess my point would be here that the really aggressive language that staff is recommending does not preclude us from looking at that. That just would become one option to explore in our effort to get to the targets that this plan language establishes.
Aaron, but I'm trying to, I've been using your numbers, so I want to make sure I understand them. Is it reasonable to say then that the two outfalls that flow directly through to Vinewood and Ravenwood Park are over capacity in a 10-year storm, and the remaining two are one slightly under and one a little bit more under? I mean, the numbers.
Generally speaking, I think that would be a reasonable statement based on what we've seen.
Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Karen.
Go ahead, Karen.
I would like some clarification on the good forested conditions. If I may ask a couple questions. There are multiple stages of a forest maturity. There's full maturity, where you've got the full tree cover and you've got other things coming up, and you have the lower plants that are some of the trees that are supposed to grow under the canopy or coming back, and there's different stages. Is good forested conditions a completely mature forest, or is it at any of those stages in between? New forest to, I don't remember the names of all of them, but I know they go through stages. That was a question.
I believe the good forest would represent the type of forest that would provide you the least amount of runoff rate. So
a fully mature.
It would be a full mature forest. Yeah.
A fully mature. Okay. And then from reading this, it looks like you would then calculate what your hope would be to say, if this plot was fully forested, all of it, not with the existing church, no impervious space, whatever. If it was fully forested, that flow rate is what you would try to achieve with the new, and I'm thinking of the word development.
Yes. Well, that would include whatever is covered under this application and would come in as the project limits.
Please explain that. Does that mean that you take the current pervious space to reverse impervious and figure that out, or you take the current impervious space, measure what that flow would be based on the definition of a good forested condition, without the asphalt, without the building? This would be the normal runoff for that plot. And that's what I want clarification on.
Yeah, I can answer that. It's for the whole parcel. It includes the church and the current surface parking area. It's not just for the.
As if it wasn't there. As if it wasn't there.
That's right.
Okay.
The way this is written, this refers to the entire parcel. And so I just wanted to clarify that for.
And that's what I'm asking. Thank you for translating, Clara. Clara, I appreciate that.
I can barely translate some of this other stuff, so I'm happy to offer that. I do know that.
Okay, so if that building wasn't there, you would try to figure out what the fully mature forest would have runoff, and that would be the expectation of the runoff of the new development. The hope.
That's how this is written, and so anybody's understanding that differently on the development team, or that would be a good time to let us know. But that's how this is written. It refers to the entire parcel. This implementing this requires bringing in the whole parcel.
So, Karen, did you have a second question?
No, those were the two questions in
Okay,
there.
thank you. Other task force members have questions about this language?
I do.
Marty,
Go ahead, Bill.
Ed here.
Go ahead,
Just
Ed.
on the verbiage, I noticed that back in August, the task force, or you sent out recommendations that are somewhat like these right now, but somewhere how we went from shall do these things to now everything is should. It seems to me with all the energy around, something's got to be done. Should is a softer word and provides some wiggle room. Well, we tried, whereas shall is a little bit stronger. Was that something that was by design?
Sure, and I can also answer. I can also answer that one. I think we get that question most often when it comes to the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is written in terms of shoulds because it's a guide. We don't use the language of ordinance and regulation. It would be misleading. I mean, the comprehensive plan is a guide, and the strength of the comprehensive plan comes from how seriously county decision makers take it. But we do intentionally write the comprehensive plan in terms of shoulds.
Okay, and I assume there's somewhere down the pike if the developers or the designers, when they really put the rubber meets the road and they say, hey, we gave it a good shot, but there's nothing we can do about stormwater, that's okay. It just seems like there's so much energy to do something that we can upgrade it. So anyway, just my random thoughts there.
And just Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, Marty. Along those lines, I've been thinking about that word should, and I went a little bit further in thinking that maybe it should say must in certain cases, but maybe that is overstepping our role based upon what Clara just said about the comprehensive plan. But I'm looking at this whole project as maybe one of the last good opportunities we have to maybe fix a problem before we make another problem, especially with the stormwater issue. So it might be, I would like to see it a little more forceful in our recommendation, that it's not a question of, well, maybe we should or maybe we shouldn't. It says you must take into consideration in a number of the areas in these bullets, and make it more forceful. And so I just throw that out also.
Other task force members, Bill, did I hear you?
Yes. Couple of questions, and I'm very, I appreciate Clara's differentiating the language used in the comp plan versus what would be used when we get to the rezoning phase, wherein there are plenty of shalls in rezoning language when you know the design and the developer commits to hard must-dos in their project. So I think that will come in the stage. Let me go back and revisit the very good question Jeff had, which is the first part of my query. For either of the Katies, there is a matrix, there is a table, there is an empirical understanding of what the amount of runoff from 6.7 acres of good forested conditions would equal in terms of outflow. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is not an unknown. Different question to the land use team. Is this good forested conditions language used anywhere else in Fairfax County's comp plan?
Yes, it is.
And is it on a parcel of approximately the same size? And
Most
can you give me an example that might drive it home?
Most recently, it was used in some revisions to the comprehensive plan through a plan amendment at 7700 Leesburg Pike. So that
Tyson's
is
Corner right there at the intersection?
I think
Yes.
so. Yeah, maybe approximately
Yes.
around there. And then there is some reference to pretty substantial similar conditions in the McLean Business Center plan amendment that was worked on this year.
So there is precedent for this in other similarly urbanish areas of Fairfax County, correct?
Yeah, and the McLean CBC is obviously a larger general area that includes quite a few additional parcels than this particular plan amendment, but there's quite a bit of a discussion in there about you know, the green stormwater infrastructure, the good forested conditions, and how those can be how those stormwater conditions can be met through redevelopment. There's discussion about other existing conditions and runoff. So that's another example, a recent example also.
I would also add unsolicited input from Aaron Vincent here, the applicant's engineer, that good forested conditions are defined in the county's public facilities manual. They're the most aggressive. They're associated with the most aggressive standards the county's public facilities manual has, and so it's a metric that county staff is familiar with and able to assess on a consistent basis.
Yeah, that's very helpful. My first level of concern Jeff addressed, and Aaron, you've cleaned up. Thank you. The other one was really more of a moving forward in having spent along with several colleagues on this group a lot of time looking at land use in Bailey's Crossroads and Seven Corners. I don't believe we've ever uttered the phrase forested conditions in dealing with Seven Corners, and I'm wondering if that's if that would be an understood standard by the community, since it ain't been forested in 100 years and nothing about Seven Corners suggests forest. So I don't know, like the 7700 Tyson Leesburg Pike right there as you cross the Beltway, you know, that would be somewhat analogous, although perhaps that's even more urban. So I'm making sure we can communicate this standard effectively to the community. I am pleased to hear from Aaron that it is the aggressive end of the standard, which I think is what we intended in the language that we adopted in our earlier recommendation.
Thanks, Bill. Other task force members?
Yeah, this is Donna. I think that the two areas that you just mentioned that had put the standard into place, how did they deal with the stormwater, and how effectively is that being done?
Well, for the McLean CBC, you know, a lot of these plan amendments that I referenced are very recent, and I don't even believe that we've received a redevelopment application for any of these sites yet. I believe most of these plan amendments were just recently adopted by the Board of Supervisors. Maybe Claire or Michael knows a little bit more of the status, but I am not aware of any redevelopment, special exception, any kind of development applications that have come in yet.
No, and nothing in McLean. I don't know about 7700. I think it's still too recent, but I've been tracking McLean. Yeah, nothing there.
7700, we're the engineer on 7700 as well. That just recently was acted on by the board, and we are currently developing site plans for that one. So it's a little too early on that one as well, I'd say.
You know, I think I can speak where there are a lot of sites that are doing this that are new development. So new development on a forested site would have to meet pre-development conditions. So they would have to meet a good forested condition. So wherever, someone's cut down, an acre of forest, they are required to mirror those conditions as well. And that's met by generally a combination of green stormwater infrastructure, which helps them meet their water quality requirements, which are pretty substantial when you do that land cover conversion, and larger, generally like an underground detention facility to meet the detention requirements, because you have to hold a lot of water and release it at a very small rate to mirror that condition.
What you just
If
said.
I might jump, building on Katie, what she just said, because it went down there, and I was going to ask, can you give us some examples of what green stormwater infrastructure might be and contrast that to conventional stormwater management practices?
Yes. So green stormwater infrastructure is a fancy term for any sort of facility, I guess, that uses plants and soil to encourage holding the water, evapotranspiring it through the trees and infiltrating it into the ground where possible. So it encourages holding and retaining the water where possible and integrating those natural components in. So you like a bioretention area or rain garden, or in more urban settings, there are planter boxes. See a lot of them in Tyson's now. Even permeable pavement to some degree can be used, and swales. It's generally a type of landscaping that has soil layer and a gravel or some other sort of layer that holds the water, and then plants. And then conventional is going, sometimes it's green versus gray is what they'll talk about, is pipes or structural things that are generally there just to detain or hold the water, but offer no environmental component to it.
But those are still utilized as mitigation techniques, correct? To
Yes.
hold water, release it over time, et cetera.
Exactly, yes. And green stormwater infrastructure is usually associated with small rain events, because that's what they're designed for. They're designed to provide water quality, help filter that water out, but they can't hold a lot of water. So you generally need a combination of both to meet a requirement on a larger site.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me ask a question, make this a little bit,
I have a
practical, if I could. Jeff, I'll recognize you after I finish.
Okay.
The first sentence, stormwater management controls above the minimum standards. If I read that, I interpret that as saying that when this is done, there's going to be less water coming off of the site into the stormwater system, that fewer drops of water from this property will be in Nate Chasen's lower level in his home. Is that fair? I mean, is that a fair, sort of very basic statement of what you're trying to accomplish here?
I mean, I will say, from a comprehensive plan perspective and understanding what is happening downstream, it would be desirable if less runoff occurs from this site and flows onto other adjacent properties. With the site having, kind of some limited existing facilities right now, I think these enhancements that the plan text is suggesting will help ensure that no additional runoff that isn't already happening would occur, that we're not going to that this development would not make things worse, obviously, which is something that I feel like I've heard from the task force additionally. And, there are other design components that if and when we get a redevelopment or development proposal here that we would look at to help move this in the right direction. And, those are some strategies of trying to place as much of the new development on the existing impervious surface areas that already exist on the site. So we'll be trying to work with the applicant to do that. I don't know, Katie, if you have any
Kate,
additional details there.
I'd like to ask it this way. I mean, we know that for at least the church portion, the portion that holds the church and the surface parking, it's necessarily the case that there will be less water runoff. I mean, there will be stormwater management for that portion of the property. And then for the other portion that's currently not developed, assuming it's not already good forested condition, right, that it's meeting that standard, and maybe it is, but assuming it's not, it would hold, you would delay entry into the system. You would hold more water on site for longer. So Katie, I'm not sure if in answering your question, you're thinking just over the period of and maybe I want to ask it this way, Marty. Are you asking where the water goes?
No, what I'm asking is this visions a site, this 6.84 acre site that is in good forested condition. And naturally, if there's a rainstorm, some water will run off of that site. And what I'm asking is that the standard that we will then hold an applicant to reducing it below that level? It says reduce, or to that, at a minimum, to reduce it to that level. Because there's not only going to be the church, there's not only going to be the current parking lot, there's going to be an expanded parking lot, and there's going to be a sunken building there. All impervious, there's no forest underneath it that's absorbing the water.
Marty, can I interject here for a second?
Sure.
So I think where the disconnect is coming between what we as a task force are hoping for, but what county staff has to do, because there are certain things that by right the landowner can do. And so they're using language that complies with what is their legal rights as they go through their end of the process. And we kind of are saying, hey, we want something a little bit different or more firm. And staff is coming back and saying, we're trying our best to project that into what we can and can't do. If that helps to clarify that, like when they're saying above the minimum standards, they're saying, hey, we want you to really do this. But in the end, that's stuff that I don't think we have any control over. And that's much more a zoning and a permit thing than it is us and how we're adjusting the comprehensive plan to address a need.
Well, I think that how they do that is certainly, the details of how they do that is certainly a zoning issue. But I'm just trying to understand the vision. It's at one level, it sounds pretty good. But what I'm asking is, if what I understand it to mean is what it means. That is, we've got 6.84 acres, and if that were in good forested condition, there's a calculation per Jeff and Bill's questions that will let us know how much water would run off of that site in the storm. And
Marty, I focus back, and I'm
sorry, I've been
waiting. You're
to be
saying what
recognized.
Aaron said. We are going from
Marty,
the minimum standard to the most aggressive standard.
I'm sorry, Bill. I've been waiting to be recognized.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. All right. My question that came up when Katie was mentioning the good forest conditions, that's been the county's policy, has been, I heard a lot of testimony both from you, Marty, and from the community that when the development, that residential development came in, that your flooding issues in Ravenwood Park got a lot worse.
They did.
And so if this is the existing, good forested conditions is the existing bar by which the county holds applicants, and that's what we're trying to hold here, and we've already seen it doesn't work, then why are we setting the same bar? Because that would seem to be asking for disaster to repeat itself. And so this question is to county staff.
Yeah, go ahead, and I'll even turn it to Katie and Katie, because this isn't the standard that a developer would need to meet. This is a more rigorous standard.
So why did Katie say that this is the?
Yeah, let me turn to Katie and Katie Torgerson or Katie Herman, if you're still there, because I can't see if it's still on.
So the existing standard for a site, so if this site was to come in without going through the rezoning process, I'm speaking in general terms because I'm not a regulator, but you cannot release more water than what is currently there for the 2 and the 10-year storm events. So they couldn't release more water. And because there's a downstream flooding issue, they couldn't release more water for the 10 or the 100-year peak flow rate either. Everything is regulated by the rate of water leaving, not volume or the amount of water, but it's by a flow rate. So that's the minimum standard. The good forested condition is saying you have to not treat it as like what's there now. You have to treat it like it's a good forest. There's a forest there now. So you have to release it at an even lower rate, with a substantially lower rate, if you're looking at a parking lot that's there now.
Okay, so I thought you had said that a clear site had to meet good forested conditions.
So if the existing condition is a forest, which in some cases, think of outside in the western part of the county where we still have lots of lands available, and someone goes to build there, that's the existing condition. It's not a parking lot, it's a forest. So they cannot release more water than what's there currently. So they are essentially doing a forested rate. Does that make sense?
Okay, Marty, can you clarify how was that development? Was that an infill development or was that a new development?
That was, there was roughly 2 acres there. There was a single home on the property. There was no stormwater management on the property. It was abandoned.
In a driveway, right?
The driveway off of Peace Valley. It was abandoned, and the site itself was overgrown, was contoured, and in addition to that, the water from Rio Drive, which now flows under the walk path that connects the 2 portions of Peace Valley Lane, was not there, delivering water down to Ravenwood Park. So I'm trying to be persuaded, and that this is a more rigorous standard, and that's why I asked the question, that if it's going to meet if it's going to reduce runoff to the good forested conditions standard, that is going to be less, slower than it is today. So that when we have a rainstorm, this standard says at the peak of the storm, when the water is deepest on Nate and Lenny Chasen's property, there's going to be less water coming off of the site. And we would have had some measurable, appreciable, non-appreciable, instead of a 3-foot flood by the fence line, it would have been a 2-foot, 10-inch flood. But is that what this is telling us? I mean, is that, if people ask me tomorrow, what do we do?
Yeah.
Can I say that?
Well, the problem is that this is only one site that's contributing to the flooding.
No,
So-
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. I'm not taking you to go from 3 feet down to 0.
Okay.
I'm just saying, if we're gonna go from 3 feet in our backyards, you know, down to 2 feet, 11 inches, or 2 feet, you know, whatever is attributable to this particular site, because there are a host of other issues we haven't even touched on tonight that make, you know, that are even more potentially more problematic. But is that the reasonable expectation?
Marty?
Rob, I'm sorry, Robert, Bill had his hand up for a while. Then I can't see everyone at the same time. And then I'll go to you, Robert. Bill?
And if you could add me after Robert, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Is that Karen?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
Karen.
can't find the
Okay.
raised hand
I
button.
can see you all now. Okay, so Bill, go ahead.
Let me ask the specific question. What are the 7 houses, the redevelopment that has exacerbated issues in Ravenwood Park? Was that developed to the standard, the minimum standard, or was it developed in its language to the good forested state standard?
Not the good forested state. I mean.
No, it didn't have the good forested standard, but it,
Okay, that's a straightforward answer to a simple question. So therefore, what we are proposing for the church site is a higher, more aggressive standard than what earlier stuff was done. So it cannot be confused moving forward with doing the minimum current standard. This is the higher, most aggressive standard that can be written into comp plan language. Is that correct, staff?
that's the most aggressive language. I mean,
Thanks.
for a
Thank you.
site like this, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Real quickly though, before the subject
hold on.
changes, no one answered Marty's question going from 3 feet to like 2 feet and 9 inches or whatever. And I was kind of interested in that answer.
I want to note quickly, I'm not sure how appreciable it will be because a portion of the existing developed part of the site drains into the other sub-district. I don't know the exact numbers, but
Right, except, but there's some, you know, can we just,
some, yeah.
Can you say yes or no to that question? That
Yes.
whatever it is, it's going to be less.
Whatever it is, it's going to be less. And the only hesitation I have is just the clear picture I have of all of the properties that are contributing to the problem. And that's.
No question about it. It's not only the church. Absolutely, okay, Robert.
So that's something I want to kind of bring up again to the task force in general, right? And to actually touch on what you were making as the point there, that this reduction in flow from one site is not going to solve and or fix the localized flooding that you are experiencing in that particular area of those houses. And in fact, what I would almost want to ask the staff, could this reduction in flow from one contributor to this actually exacerbate the situation if it's holding rainwater on site and releasing at a lower flow rate for a longer period of time? Could it actually keep elevated levels of water up to where it's beyond the peak event of the rain and it lasts further into because of other contributing factors?
I believe that's taken into account during the site plan review. They look at coincide and peaks, but in this case, the drainage area is so small that the time it takes for that water to get from the church property down to Lake Parcroft is very minimal, probably 10 to 20 minutes maybe. So
it's approximately 15 minutes based on our analysis. And detention would push that back to, you know, some number of hours. So we think it would make a difference.
Right, and so that's my point that I'm trying to go on there is if it's normally say 15 minutes, and so Marty has this hyper localized, really high water rise and then actually really rapid water decline, is that now going to level out a little bit more to be more, instead of so quick to fill and then quick to drain ultimately when the system recovers, is it going to flatline more to where he experiences larger amounts of standing water for a longer period of time?
That is not our expectation. Right now, the drainage area contributing to the issues in Marty and Nate's yard is largely uncontained, and large amounts of water start to fill up in that area very quickly. And so our expectation is that what would happen on the church project is would pull water out of that immediate flooding situation that they're seeing.
Thanks. Karen?
Yeah. I just wanted to share a little bit of experience that I've had with this. I did a development in 2014, which was before, I think, the last stormwater updates from the state. And not only do you have this new good forested thing, I didn't have to deal with that, but they're going to have more roof, which multiplies the stormwater that they have to do. They're going to have more pervious space. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to hit in zoning that is going to even make that good forest even more powerful when it gets there. I know what they made me go through, and I wasn't increasing any impervious space. I was just increasing roof line. And what I had to do was ridiculous. I'm sorry, staff, but it was ridiculous what we had to do, and we didn't have a problem. So what they're proposing is actually more stringent than what this building currently exists on, and they're going to have to correct all the stuff. It looks like it was built in the 60s, and what they had in the 60s, they're going to have to correct all that. So there's going to be more than even what they have now. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Other comments, questions from task force members? It's a complicated subject, obviously, and let me ask, before I open this up to some comments or questions from those members of the public who are listening, and please, if you are and you'd like to say something or ask a question, please raise indicate that on the screen. There is one of the issues that the task force addressed in its conditions in phase 1, and an issue that has been of deep concern to the community is the question of parking. And in particular, at least based on the original concept pieces we received from the developer, the addition of an additional row of parking, I forget if it's just one car or two, on the back end of this property most adjacent to Ravenwood Park. Those who took the tour of the site or have visited the site on their own know that there is a significant drop off between the back of the church property and the rear of the single family homes in Ravenwood Park that adjoin it. And that the extension of that parking area, and that's just that drop off occurs almost at the current edge of the parking area. And that extension of that parking beyond that space will not only bring the parking and the noise and the lights and all of that closer to these homes, but will create a more dramatic kind of fall off situation. Not as dramatic as the townhomes on the top of Patrick Henry Drive, those who are familiar with them, as they approach Ravenwood Park, but a more dramatic drop off. We have also had a fairly, not robust, I wouldn't call it robust, but we had a discussion about the significant number of parking spaces in the very proximity to this site that are frequently go unused. And just as a reference, today at 4 o'clock with 356, I drove through the church parking lot. There were 3 cars parked there. I drove over to the United Church of Christ parking lot. There was 1 car parked there. There were hundreds of spots in these lots. Now I understand that those are important spots to the mosque for their prayer events, that they are used at certain periods in the day, it's more full. But we explored the option of doing some innovative parking solution to minimize the amount of extended parking that would have to be done on this site. And in addition, that extended parking goes into the heavily wooded area. So the more parking we need in this on a particular, the parking that they want to add, quite frankly, that's perpendicular to Route 7, there's no trees there. There's grass, but there are no trees. And that's sort of the area that goes into the outdoor chapel, bowl chapel that they have on the site now. So, but the staff didn't address parking at all in this recommendation. It didn't, for example, at a very preliminary level, just say, let's take a look, have some language that says we should or shall or must take a look at this. And let's see if we can make this work, because this has the potential to, eliminate or remediate some of the concerns that we have. It has the potential, to help with the second bullet that's on the staff recommendation. And I know there's a parking ordinance, and I know that there are requirements. And just like for the transportation study, you multiply A times B, and you get the number of spaces. But we also know that in rezoning applications, when we get to that process, if we were to undertake some creative thinking, that the board could waive requirements of the parking ordinance, just as it waives requirements for ordinances on a regular basis on rezoning applications. That is something that has to be done. It's not a bar. It's not a bar. So I guess the question to staff is, why hasn't the staff include in this recommendation something on parking, which is not only important in and of itself, but drives some of the other issues?
Yeah, and I'd like to take a shot at answering that. It's interesting to me how this plan guidance took shape, because in my mind we were writing what needed to be preserved and put in place, and less so what needed to not be put in place. And a lot of the focus in crafting this language had to do with not only the tree preservation, the buffering and the screening, and we used words to indicate that the purpose of that screening, the purpose of that supplemental vegetation and buffer was for screening. And that's going to require space to accomplish that. At the same time, understanding the stormwater challenge that we were going to give to this developer, the standard that they needed to meet, they are going to have, we understand they are going to have a hard time meeting that. It's going to be tough. And a big part of that will be limiting the impervious surface. So there's flexibility in how they accomplish that, while still having to mitigate all of that visual impact, have some distance from the neighborhood. So those were the parameters we thought were rigorous enough to keep in place. The parking, that's a part of impervious surface. Staff didn't identify shared parking as a solution to identify right now for the plan amendment. We did see that was in some of the correspondence and we had received. But if the purpose of limiting surface parking, if one purpose is to limit impervious surface, we think we've got conditions for that. If the purpose is to preserve some of that treed area, visual screening, we tried to address that, but we didn't name parking. You're right, but that's how we were thinking about it. And Michael, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
No, that was it. We thought about the impacts that parking would have on some of the concerns that you all raised, as Clara mentioned, impervious surface screening. And so we addressed what we thought the challenges were, or the challenges that we heard from you all in those bullets. We didn't speak explicitly to parking itself.
So it's sort of a chicken and egg sort of question. So you looked at things you wanted to do, outcomes you wanted to achieve, and perhaps that may impact the parking. But I mean, to my mind, if we could eliminate that row of parking, which is a significant chunk of space, we would reduce impervious surface, we would retain existing tree buffer, we would bring light and noise pollution further away from the homes there, you know, all the things that you want to sort of do. This doesn't preclude your analysis and on all those other items, but it just seems to me that, you know, we ought to.
We would have an expectation that whatever the impacts are from any new parking space would be addressed, and the existing language accomplishes that. There's flexibility for them, and they can certainly determine whether that row of parking is needed or if they want to explore some other way to address those challenges. But it's the onus is on the applicants to try to meet whatever those standards are. And so, again, if a shared parking arrangement, for example, Marty, is an identified solution by the church to help them meet some of the other goals, they're certainly able to do that. But we don't want to necessarily stipulate what their solutions should be. That's their responsibility to meet that. And so those options would be evaluated once they filed for a specific.
Well, I understand, you know, I understand that. And I mean, all these things, all the things that you've touched on here, I could make that same argument, Michael, and to take them out. I mean, this is an issue that if they want to do it that way to meet these other standards, you know, let's.
Yeah. And I will say that kind of detail often comes when we have concurrent processing of a plan amendment and a zoning application, which isn't the case here. You will see detailed language where those kinds of details are stipulated. Here, there was a concept, but it's not really it's not a fully baked concept. You know, we wouldn't be able to say remove that last line of parking because there is no last line of parking.
I'm not suggesting that we say that.
I get it. I get it. And so what it would look like is you is telling them what the box of development is. So saying like a certain distance from, you know, that property line has to, that's how I'm imagining we could accomplish something like that. And we weren't, okay.
If you want to do that, that'd be great. I mean, all I'm suggesting, the question I have is, why don't we should or must or shall say, you'll take a look at it. You'll explore innovative parking solutions. You know, look, the church is busy on Sunday. It's not busy other days. Mm-hmm. You know, the spots that we have to set up there for the building of that size are going to be vacant 95% of the time during the week. That's just the reality, you know, and yet we are saying that we have to sort of build additional parking while we have all these empty spots. I mean, and look, I understand there's some this project will generate some permanent parking requirements. People who live there may have cars. It will generate requirements for visitors. We would certainly want to accommodate that. It will generate requirements for those who work in and use the clinic facility. You know, I mean, I'm not saying this is an easy thing to solve, or that it can be solved. I'm just saying, let's take a look. Let's give it a try. Let's give it the old college try, like we are, you know, doing all these other items. You know, let's see what we can do. You know, and do our best to sort of limit. And you know, and Donna, perhaps you can shed a little bit more. Donna mentioned to me that Fairfax has initiated this parking reimagined program, you know, which is designed to sort of look at all these parking requirements we have and perhaps reduce them and, you know, make more sense out of those. And now that we're a more developed and, you know, county, more mature county, and we have this infill, this redevelopment going on, see how that can work with existing facilities. I mean, it seems like in that spirit of that initiative, we would do something like that on this project. Josh?
Oh, yeah, Marty. Marty, I think I kind of like want to reframe it as like, is there something we can put in the plan, this comprehensive plan amendment, or something we can suggest that would encourage them to find a more creative parking solution? Because like Marty said, it's kind of like looking at the traffic stuff, it kind of seems like church on Sunday is like a concert. You've got a bunch of people arriving all at once, and the rest of the time it's the venue is mostly empty, or not mostly empty, but you don't need all that parking. So if we could encourage them to find a creative parking solution, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah. And we can take that as the task force suggestion if that's what the task force wants to add to this. And what would happen is just we take that back to the group of staff that have been working on the text, and we can try to incorporate that idea, or it moves forward as an idea anyway, but from the task force. I think that's what I would recommend at this point. And I appreciate the discussion, because when I read some of the correspondence about this, it really the topic of parking had to do with light pollution and noise and a lot of things. And if it's just about reducing parking spaces if they're not needed, well, I mean, that's something the county is interested in. We're interested in the other aspects too, but we were trying to address those differently. So I think that's helped to clarify it.
Other comments or questions from task force members? Bill?
I'm agnostic, Marty. I don't have a problem with looking at some language that references parking, but I will remind folks that parking spaces cost money, and I haven't met too many developers that want to build more than they need because it's extra cost. So anything that can be done, and I appreciate that we've prioritized these other space, vegetation and stormwater, from the group, because I think that's where the priorities are. And Claire, I think you're right. That will guide a lot of what the developer considers and the cost of parking and what they ultimately bring forward during the rezoning phase as a design consideration.
Other comments or questions from task force members? We have a couple of members of the public who've been listening in who'd like to ask questions or share concerns. I'm going to start now with Rodney North. Rodney, can we open up his line?
Can you hear
Mr.
me?
North? Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. So FYI, tonight I've been using the Q&A section. I don't know if people look at that. So if not, please check it out. Made a number of points over there already. You can cut and paste it and read it later, or this may be involved, or it may be captured in this recording to be reviewed later. One of my major points is, and because this is a matter of interpretation, the staff has issued recommendations, and it's not clear how we, the public, should interpret it. The way I phrase it, like in the Q&A, is that the developer should try to do X, Y, Z. They should try to minimize this or reduce that as much as possible. As I read it, it is you can build up to 115 units and then do your best with this other stuff, and we'll cross our fingers and hope for the best. Is that correct? Or is it the opposite, which is do everything you can to reduce, say, runoff, and then build as many units as then fit, given the prior efforts? So it could be, to hit those goals, we can only build 60 units. So how should we interpret that language?
Sure. And the structure of many plan options, at the base level, this, and Michael, remind me how this is planned, because I've already forgotten that this property is planned. What is it, institutional use?
Institutional. And I
It's
think
just planned for institutional use. And so this is an option to that base. And the way it's phrased is intentional. It may be appropriate if you can accomplish the following. And we use the up to language intentionally as well. Like that's a ceiling, but it's not 115 units. It's up to, and then it's if you can meet the following conditions. So I don't know if that helps answer the question that
It's
you said it's
starting,
the conditions.
it is starting to answer the question. So what is the mechanism by which, say, the building scale is actually affected by the efforts to achieve X, Y, Z?
Right. Well, I think in this case, stormwater is the biggest constraint. And then the ability to screen the building from the neighborhood. And then there are there's other policy guidance about compatibility where we would want to, typically we would want to see that development pushed closer to Route 7, things like that. And I see in the comment, and I'm sorry, I wasn't following the Q&A, and so we will look at that. And by we, you asked about the mechanism.
Yes.
Ultimately, it's the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, but there is a negotiation during the entitlement process where staff is working with them. Staff is working with them to hold these standards.
So to use stormwater runoff, because it is maybe more quantifiable than some of the other variables, let's say to hit the good forested runoff bar, say there's no more than 10,000 gallons of runoff per hour in a 100-year storm. And everything is done that can be done. And it's like, gee, we're still not hitting that bar. Is that where it's like, okay, we got to look at reducing the scale, and we keep reducing it until we hit that very specific runoff metric? Is that how it works?
That has been how that's used. You know, I can't tell you what will happen here exactly because there are multiple goals. So you'll have to prioritize.
Sure. I was trying to get an idea using one variable so that the rest of us could kind of get a look under the hood, so to speak, about how the process works.
So I can think of many examples where it's less units, less size. You know, sometimes it's just, the amount in the plan can't be achieved.
And Clara, real quick, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're informing the guide, but it is guides, which the guiding rails is it should be in the substantial. What is proposed as actual developments needs to be in substantial conformance to what's in the comprehensive plan, if I recall.
The language, right? the language in statute is general conformance.
General conformance.
When it's a rezoning. Yeah.
Okay. So general conformance. And so like they couldn't then come and you know, so we have 115. And so if they, you know, did 116, that would probably be general conformance. But if they did 300, you know, that would probably not be considered general conformance, and we would have to update the plan text.
Right, something like that would be far outside anything that I could conceive of.
Yes.
I've never seen anything like that happen, right?
But there is a little bit of wiggle room that staff or decision makers would probably have and the applicant would have as they work with you.
Right. I mean, not with a number that's specific, like that is also actually unusual.
Okay.
Something like an additional unit is unusual. I think it might have happened. I can't even remember which example, but yes. So they're taken seriously, those numbers, that guidance. I don't want to, you know, something that's not in the text, it's not highlighted in the text because it's not a limitation, is the fact that these are affordable units. And we did bring to you in the past information about board initiatives and providing affordable housing and the need for affordable senior housing. So, you know, all of that will be also considered for this proposal, and you don't see it in the conditions, but all of that is weighed. I didn't want to ignore that.
Thanks, Clara. Let me move on. Terry Lavoie. We open that line.
Mr. Lavoie?
Hello?
Mrs.
Hello, hi, Mary, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you so much to the staff and task force members for all the time and effort you all spend on behalf of Fairfax County residents. I see how much work it is, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight to express my support of the First Christian Church nomination. If it's okay, I'm just going to read my comments. My name is Terry O'Hara Lavoie, and I am a longtime Mason District resident. In 1991, just before we were married, my husband Jack and I purchased our house on Landis Street and have raised our children there. The original structure was built in 1900 and is the original dwelling for a 30-acre farm, the Howdershell Farm. The land was redeveloped in the 1930s to make way for houses on Landis Street as well as Park Lawn Elementary School. I'm a parishioner at St. Anthony of Padua and co-founded Colmar Clinic, an interfaith free clinic serving uninsured adults in the Bailey's Crossroads community. My co-founder, Ann Cartwright, is also a Mason District resident and a parishioner at St. Anthony's. We recognize the great need for medical care in this neighborhood, and with partners like Annandale United Methodist Church, St. Anthony's, and the Northern Virginia Healthcare Foundation, the clinic opened its doors in 2007 at the Dar El Hijra Islamic Center. Colmar Clinic operated from 2011 to 2019 at Columbia Crossroads Baptist Church, and then we moved to First Christian Church, where we operate today. Colmar Clinic patients are essential workers. They are babysitters and house cleaners, construction workers, drivers, restaurant workers, and more. They work 2 and 3 jobs to support their families, but are not offered any kind of medical support through their workplace. At Colmar Clinic, they receive primary medical care through a predominantly volunteer staff who provide compassionate services. They are referred to a litany and vast resources in other ancillary care like Inova Health Center and so many others. I want to emphasize the importance of this nomination, which will address critical community issues, including providing affordable senior housing and access to affordable health care. Specifically, in addition to affordable housing for vulnerable seniors, this nomination will allow Colmar Clinic to move from the basement of First Christian Church, where we now operate 3 days a week, to space set aside in the new development. The move will allow Colmar Clinic patients to be served in dedicated medical space and continue our association with First Christian Church. This will be a beautiful blessing to Colmar Clinic patients and will allow Colmar Clinic to enhance the menu of services already provided to these people. A big part of Colmar Clinic's success is its association with more than 17 different area faith partners and the Lake Barcroft community. Lake Barcroft residents serve as clinic volunteers, like our medical director, Dr. Charles Siderman, Lorraine Creeley, who was just nominated as vice president of our board of directors, and Pedro Torina, who served with us for many years, enrolling new patients. When Colmar Clinic surged to a full-time clinic during the COVID crisis, Lake Barcroft maskers crafted masks for our patients when this critical protection was at a premium. The Lake Barcroft Women's Club has taken Colmar Clinic on as a charity, and dozens of individual residents support our mission with generous donations. Colmar Clinic is of and for this community in the deepest and most abiding ways. Well, I mentioned my own slice of history in the place I call home. There's an interesting history in the work I'm called to at Colmar Clinic. I learned that Lake Barcroft was actually named for Dr. John Barcroft, a physician who practiced in the area in 1849. He also ran a mill. This is what probably makes him the first multitasker, although I am really not sure I can confirm that. But in all seriousness, it is fitting that this project looks to the future in partnership with a community named for a medical person. We are also clear that Colmar Clinic has had a great impact on the patients in the neighborhood. At the same time, we're confident that the proposed development would have minimal impact on the surrounding street network. We're also confident that First Christian Church, as well as Wellesley Housing, will work diligently through future zoning process to mitigate the impacts of this development. I'm really hopeful that this plan amendment moves forward so that these important community goals can be realized. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Terry. I think everyone on the task force appreciates the work that the Comore Clinic does in our community and the importance of the Comore Clinic to our community. So I appreciate your comments. Janine Schroeder.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Janine. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity. My name is Janine Schroeder. I am actually a member of First Christian Church for the last 15 years. Serve on its board. I've been on the committee that's been working on this project since its inception. Obviously I'm here to, support First Christian Church's proposal here and the comprehensive plan amendment that would help us move forward. We were organized in 1952 in this location in Leesburg Pike. So we've been there almost 70 years. We're the property owners. We've been there, worshiping, trying to live our faith and our values, in this location. You've probably seen some of the things that we've done that relate to our mission. So Safe Haven on Thursdays that feeds people who are food insecure. Comore Clinic, obviously, has been discussed quite a bit. And, we have, as you drive by, you can see the garden that's in the front of the church. That food that's produced in the garden is actually passed out, at Safe Haven for people who are struggling to put food on the table. So we have long recognized the needs of our community, and we consider this affordable housing project for seniors to be another element of our mission and another really important need in our community, especially for seniors who are living on fixed incomes. I think we all know how expensive housing is in our area. So when Fairfax County approached us years ago now, to see if we're interested in using our land to address this problem, we really embraced that idea and, did our best to figure out what we could do here. And that included engaging with Ravenwood Park, the Chateau, the funeral home, all of our neighbors to figure out what is it that we could do that is sort of the best solution for us to be able to use our land, be able to meet our mission, and still have something that, is acceptable to the larger community. And that's where we came up with that. That leads us to this point where we've partnered with Wesley. Wesley has shown a very strong commitment in making sure that we're doing this additional analysis and engaging with all of you for the issues that we're aware of in the neighborhood. And so we've been good neighbors basically for the last 70 years, and we hear the concerns and we'd like to do our part. We'd really like support for the comprehensive plan amendment so that we can get to the next stage of this. We expect to be able to work out the sort of balance of needs and the goal of this project, which is to also serve our community and the mission of the church. We need to get to a more specific place. We need to get past the comprehensive plan amendment piece. So I'm encouraging you to remember that, we've been here for 70 years. We're not going anywhere. When we manage to build this property, Wesley will be managing it. They'll be here for decades as well. We are long-term partners in this, and we want to work to some solutions, but we really need your support so that we can move this along. It's been years now already, and we'd really like to see it come to the next step so we can eventually get to completion. And thank you. Those are the points that I wanted to make. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Janine. And now we come to the point in our agenda.
Marty?
Yes, who was that?
This is Shelley Murphy. I'm sorry, I had my hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it, Shelley. Go ahead.
I just wanted to take a moment. First of all, I want to thank the committee members. You all have put in a lot of hard work to try to understand this, and we've tried to be alongside of you to understand the needs and concerns so that we could address them going forward. Just as Janine did, I want to take a minute and remind you who we are as a partner in the community. So Wesley Housing just had its 48th anniversary. We were founded in Fairfax County. Our headquarters is in Mason District. Our very first property that we did was completed in 1978, Strawbridge Square in Mason District. We still own and operate that property. So that's why when we talk about listening and being good neighbors, that's what we intend to be, because we really do want to work with you proactively going forward. The conditions that are proposed by county staff are difficult and they are stringent, but we really feel like we can find a way to meet them. And we want to do that as part of understanding the needs that you all have in terms of stormwater and also in terms of screening and light pollution and all those. We understand that as well. When you're doing an infill project, trying to preserve the character of the neighborhood or improve the character of the neighborhood is something that we want to do as part of being good neighbors. So we've talked a little bit about the need for affordable housing. Again, the county has reinvigorated their initiative for church partnerships to provide affordable housing in the county. This would be the first example of that in the county, and we would really like to see it move forward given the high need for affordable housing for seniors, given the mission heart that First Christian Church has, and given that we're already all neighbors within Mason District, we'd like to make it a little bit closer relationship through this project. So I would really hope that you see fit to support the plan amendment moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley.
Hey, Marty, we have one additional attendee, Stephanie Weber, who'd like to speak.
Oh, hi, Stephanie.
Let me unmute her.
Stephanie.
Mrs. Weber, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
I just want to reiterate that I'm totally supportive of low-income housing or affordable housing for seniors and the work that the church is trying to accomplish here. But I guess, I work with green buildings and, in the green building industry, and there's a noticeable problem that has been going on is that you design something to be green, like green infrastructure, and because it's, natural environments that you're trying to mimic, you don't always end up getting the exact same performance that you think you might end up getting. And so there's a movement to do sort of a post-construction commissioning to see what the performance of these systems actually is. And so when we say we're going to try to have all this green infrastructure going in at this site, I guess I'm concerned that once it's in and that's done, if it's not performing, then what's the plan at that point, right? And are there any, and we're already setting this developer up for a very high bar, which I appreciate living downhill from that site. But if we set this very high bar for this developer and they cannot meet it, or they try and it does not meet it, then what is the remedy for this site? Because I have had flooding in my backyard, and and it was very expensive to sort of mitigate that. And so what kinds of things are there, offsets that then the developer can come to our community or to the surrounding communities to do to offset where it failed to perform, or are there things that the county can do for us to offset where those projects failed?
Thank you, Stephanie, for that. It's a good point. I mean, that's sums up well where we find ourselves relative to the new development on Peace Valley Lane, where and I'm not going to hold I'm not going to hold you guilty for their problems, but all of the same language and all of the same promises and all of the same commitments were made. And it's just been a disaster for us in Ravenwood Park. I mean, there's there is among neighbors here, those immediately affected and those not immediately affected, there's a significant degree of skepticism. And I appreciate the language and the words that we've heard from Wesley and from the church about being long-term neighbors and being here for a long time, and wanting to continue, a good relationship, and that's all. I appreciate that. And we will need to at some point, and perhaps county staff can clue us in a little bit here, is what happens when we do all the right things and all the wrong things turn out, or it doesn't, perform as our expectations, as we were led to believe in the process. How does the county come back and revisit and require upgrades, changes, what have you? And I will say that may not be a, something that is appropriate for the comprehensive plan language, but, what do we do down the road if despite our best intentions, our strongest language, our most difficult work by Aaron and others, it doesn't work as we hoped? What do we do then?
So I'll answer quickly, and then others can chime in. I think we would, of course, want to identify the cause of the problem. If it's stormwater, in the example that's being used, this is where DPWES, and I believe it's Allison, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong. There are steps that you can take and folks that you can communicate with in the county to raise what the issues are. I'm not familiar with all of the paths, particularly for addressing stormwater concerns if there's a downstream issue. But there's a path of communication that residents can follow, and it's not always clear. And I know this particular amendment provided an opportunity to connect the dots on some of those issues, and so we're grateful for the participation of DPWES even at this stage. But I'll defer to Katie Torgerson in terms of, if it's a stormwater issue as we're talking about now, what the appropriate steps are.
So all stormwater, private stormwater facilities undergo a conditional assessment or an inspection every 5 years. So they do have ongoing inspections. It's required by our permit, the county permit for stormwater, and then to ensure that they are functioning as designed. So I hope that clears up the question of, what happens to ensure that those facilities are functioning.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, the stormwater facilities on the Champion Oaks are functioning as designed. They are just the wrong fix, the wrong solution. It's a bigger problem, and as a consequence, when I look out my back window, there's 100 sandbags by our neighbor's back door. So I appreciate that. Stephanie Weber raised that question. It's an important question. Again, I don't think that it's one that we can fully address, at the comprehensive plan stage, but it is a challenge, and I appreciate that the effort that the county has undertaken to try to provide some overland relief to our problem. Allison Brewer, I think Michael, you were referring to, is working with us on that, and we very much appreciate that. And that's remedial action that the county might take. It's not remedial action on the site to revisit the trench that was put in there, and the line that was put in underneath the walkway. So that's an important issue, Stephanie, and we're going to have to keep on top of that for those of us who live downstream from the property. I don't see any other hands raised.
Hey, Marty, give me 1 second. Janine Schroeder suggested a gentleman who wanted to speak, but I'm not seeing his name. I'll unmute her momentarily. Mrs. Schroeder, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Bob McCoy from our, who's also a member of our church, messaged me and told me he's on the line but isn't being recognized.
I don't see his name. Is he,
I see it down there.
you do see it?
Yeah, you have, it's at the bottom of the list. Bob, you have to somehow raise your hand to be recognized. Can someone indicate what the button is, or?
Yeah, there's a, well, if I can find it.
Oh, there we go.
You see him?
Are you on? He opened up his line.
I'm not seeing him at all on my list of attendees.
He's
Is it Robert? I see it.
Robert McCoy. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
There you
Sorry
go.
for that, Mr. McCoy.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was a late registrant. We had a church meeting this evening, so I couldn't register too early. But thank you for the opportunity. I'm a longtime resident in the Mason District area. We've lived in this area since 1983. So we've been in Annandale for a long, long time, and we are members of First Christian Falls Church. Just a couple short things. I was a part of the church board when the county approached the faith-based community back in 2011 to initiate this project. It was presented to us as a goal to eradicate homelessness within 10 years, which obviously hasn't happened. I don't know that you'll ever eradicate homelessness, but we took that opportunity to actually start reflecting as to what we could do, or is this something we could do? And as we looked into it and we got into it, we realized that we did have a parcel of land. It wasn't huge, but it was enough that something positive could come of that. Doing a project of creating this affordable housing unit for seniors does meet with the church's mission. We're not, looking to put any market rate properties in this project. It's all affordable housing. It would also encompass a home, more permanent home for the Culmore Clinic, which I think would be wonderful for them and for the residents that participate there. And we're very much wanting to see this project move through so that we can have another means of supporting the community in this way. And we're working with this Food Uniting Neighbors to create additional food for many that can't put it on their table. So there's a lot of very positive things going on in the church. This is a just one more facet of that we feel would be a benefit to the community. I understand the concerns about the stormwater drainage, and that a lot of that has been in existence long before any of this was ever conceived. So this is not a cause and effect. But something that I believe from what I understand from Wesley, that they're able to help mitigate some of that, maybe not eradicate it, but mitigate some of it. So we're just hopeful that this will move forward, and certainly appreciate the the consideration on the part of this committee to move it forward so that this can actually be realized. So I'll just stop there, and I do appreciate your all's continued work on this.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate your comments. Before we move forward to determine if what we're going to do this evening, Michael, you said earlier that is this the final staff language, or is the staff still working on this? Can the task force ask the staff to come back with some language on this parking issue? There's some additional language that I'd like to see. I mean, is there an opportunity to sort of, work on these things and come back with ideally we have a sort of a unified, I think that it's good for the task force, good for the staff. I hate to punt this thing into January if we don't have to, but I, for one, we can stay here online and craft language about parking, but would like to sort of maybe ask the staff to do that. And I've got a few small amendments that I'm going to offer to the language the staff has come up with.
Marty,
Yeah.
before we even get there, doesn't staff need to know if we want to continue further with this or not? Like, we can't talk about amendments to things that we haven't yet re-voted on.
Well, I'm just before we get to the formal Robert's rules and making, I'm just want to, what's the comfort level with moving forward, and asking staff to come back to us with some changes, as opposed to sort of, we can, it's 9:12, we can spend the next period of time working those out online.
If you're comfortable, Marty, and if the task force is supportive of the nomination and would like to see the additional language, you're welcome to do that. If that's via a vote now, you're welcome to do that. We will continue to take the feedback that you've all provided tonight and take another look at the language, take it through our internal process of review, and then we can follow up with you absolutely at our next meeting in January. Likewise, if there are elements of staff's language, and Marty, I know you and I had talked about this earlier, you all are able to contribute as a part of your recommendation to the Planning Commission. Ideally, we would like them to be as in sync as possible. But if there are differences, the task force does have an avenue for sharing your thoughts and your recommendations directly. And it will make it easier for, I think, the elected officials or appointed officials to review if it's in combination with the language that we've provided here, the framework language we provided here.
Okay. Let me just throw it out. How would task force members like to proceed? Should we begin amending this tonight and try to reach a consensus? And Robert, I think we would have an up or down vote, yes or no, at the end of that process. But would task force members like to sort of reflect on this a little bit in the conversations we've had this evening? I know that Jan has some scheduling issues in January.
Are we saying that there's a consensus among the task force members to vote to recommend to continue this as an approval moving forward?
No,
I'm not. Assuming that, and so we're punting down the road something that we don't even know how we feel.
No, I'm not suggesting that there is that consensus. I think we have two options. First, we can step through this tonight. We can start with motions and amendments tonight. Secondly, we can ask staff to reflect on our conversation tonight and try to come back to us with a draft that tries to accommodate some of those concerns, and we can go through the process in January. I'm trying to get a sense for task force members' comfort level with making decisions tonight based on our conversations so far.
Sure.
I have a suggestion, and I'm not sure if this was a clear alternative. It could be that you vote on this language and you don't have to craft the language. You could say, and in addition, add a condition about, parking strategies or innovation in parking, however you would like to phrase it. What we would do is then we would still have to, if you requested it, write that as plan text, so that it could be a part of your recommendation. And then we would at the same time consider having that be a part of staff's recommendation.
Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we start our consideration of this? We'll make amendments as we did the first time around. If we vote to add a parking language, we can try to draft some language that we can adopt at our next meeting as part of our final recommendation to the Planning Commission. Does that make sense?
No.
No?
I don't understand. What are you trying to say? You want to do what now? Do addendums now?
I think we can, not addendums, we can.
Amendments.
We have the staff recommendation before us.
Yes.
As we would normally do, we could move adoption of the staff recommendation, that would then be open to amendment. And we would consider all amendments offered by task force members
This evening?
this evening. We could do an up or down vote at the end. And we would have that, but I'm saying that we hold the final draft open. If we agree that we should add parking language, we should hold our final draft open to come up with that language and vote on that. Just as we did the first time around, if you recall, we voted to move
Yeah, but
the,
we were here until 11 o'clock, and I don't think that's tenable for those of us who have to get up at 5:30 in the morning.
Yep. Can I make a suggestion on procedure?
Sure.
I've seen sometimes the Board of Supervisors use a procedure called getting the pulse of the board. What I would suggest is we have three options on the table. Whether or not we have it's a unofficial poll of each task force member on whether or not they support the staff text as is. They support the the staff test, but they would like amendment, unspecified amendments, or they do not support the plan amendment at all. And we just get a pulse of where people stand, and then we can know better about where we stand. So I'd like for us to do that. Does that sound reasonable?
so we're going to take an unofficial poll of task force members to see where they may, on your three points, Jeff, where they might be.
Yeah, it'll help prevent us from putting the cart before the horse of let's say maybe 6 current task force members don't support the plan amendment any longer.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
We can't move forward with the assumption that everyone does.
Okay. Well, this is not an amendment. This is not a vote. This is not a motion. We're going to take an informal poll, and I will go first at responding to. I may support the task force, the staff amendment proposal with amendments. I don't, until I see those amendments, I can't. But I am, if the amendments go the way I'd like them to go, I may support it. Robert?
I don't support this plan amendment.
Okay, hold on a second. Hold on 1 second. I'm trying to keep tasks. Support with amendments. Don't support.
I got a tab. I'm keeping it 1 to 1. Where are you, Jeff?
I am currently. I can put in support with amendments.
Okay. Donna?
I can put in support with amendments.
Okay. Bill?
I support it.
Ed?
Support with future amendments to be considered.
Jan?
I can support with amendments.
Karen?
Support.
Okay, I mean, we have, 2 supporting, 1 opposing, and 3 potentially supporting with amendments. Excuse me, 6. 5, I'm sorry, 5.
Yep.
5.
Oh, and Marty, I would support it as well.
I'm sorry, Josh.
Where
are you?
I support it.
So we get back to the original question. Do we want to do amendments tonight? Or would we like to take some time to think about this? And those of us who might like to offer amendments have a chance to sort of come up with those ideas and vote at our next meeting. I have 3 amendments ready to go tonight. So, I'm ready to go tonight.
I can do it tonight.
Okay.
Why don't you take a poll just like you did, whether we could continue? Mine is I cannot.
Okay. Who would, I can continue tonight, Jeff?
I can continue.
Bill?
I'm reluctant to continue tonight. We've hammered a lot of stuff out, and I think we came in here prepared for the January meeting to get everything on the table, wrap it up, and make the final definitive vote.
Okay.
And I think now hustling sort of the front end on that when we are still going to have to meet in January provides only the opportunity to stretch out rhetoric without reflection. So
Donna?
I would prefer to delay.
Okay,
I
Donna?
can continue.
Robert?
I'm going to concur with Bill and say that, yeah, January might be a better opportunity to more actively reflect on these thoughts.
Ed?
Yeah, I'm tending towards January also. I'd like to see the amendments in writing, and if anybody else, I don't want to go through the same process again in January because somebody says, oh, I got another amendment. Let's
Okay.
use a couple of weeks to get them all on the table.
Josh?
I guess I'm fine with anything. I mean, I'd prefer to try and get this done sooner, but if we, have to wait till January so we can get thoughts out, I think that's fine.
Jan?
I'd rather not continue tonight, but I'm conflicted because I will be gone for a couple of weeks in January. So it may be that I'm not able to attend a January meeting. I mean, I can give you the dates that I am not available in case you want to work around those. From the 8th to the 21st, I'm gone.
Okay, that's helpful, Mrs. Keys.
All right.
Donna, sorry.
I will vote to do this in January so that prevails 5-4.
So Marty,
So
if I may.
we'll make a formal motion to render a decision on this plan amendment at the January meeting of the task force.
Can I ask a question? With
Wait,
the amendments,
just a second. Donna, Robert made a motion. Is there a second?
I'm sorry.
A second. Karen.
Karen seconded. Is there discussion? Donna?
Okay. With the amendments, can they be written out and given to us ahead of time? So we don't spend as much time in January?
I would certainly appreciate that, especially as the secretary person that has to keep track of votes and stuff and who's voting on trying to approve what amendment. So yes.
Okay, Michael, and Clara, is there a FOIA issue there?
If you forward your comments or your amendments to me, then I can be the coordinator and make sure that everyone.
Right. So let's maybe I suggested when we land on a date, Michael, that taking into account Jan's calendar, let's set the Friday before that week for amendment language to be submitted so it can be circulated to us in a single package.
So there's two points I wanted to make quickly. One, if Mrs. Keys is out on the 8th, I'm going to try to find a time during that first week, but I wanted to gauge.
Can we keep it though right now focused on the motion at hand?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it had concluded. Sorry.
We had a first and a second. We had some conversation about particulars related to a January meeting, but that no longer now particularly relate to the motion. So we should be putting the motion to a vote.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Abstentions. Motion carries. And we're going to make this decision in January. Michael?
Yes. So I can look for a time in that first week. I just want to be cognizant that it's the holidays and make sure that this group is comfortable, number one. Number two, we still have to bring back the information regarding the Islamic Center in January. So there's a higher likelihood that we may need to extend into an additional meeting. I know I promised you all one additional meeting in January, but given the discussions, we may need an additional time. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of the.
And I need to check expectations on this text. It was certainly, if that's the deadline the task force gives itself, we would be able to then reflect back what the task force has shared and compile that and share that But if the expectation is that staff would then have time to come up with our version of it, we would need to build that into
The schedule.
we would need a little more time to do that. So the sooner we get the task force potential additional length, either written as text or even just however you want to express the concern that you don't think was addressed, we can turn that into draft plan text, whether staff supports it or not. But yeah.
So if I look at the calendar, and if we are potentially targeting January 5th as our next meeting date on this topic, knowing that, and Marty had thrown out the previous Friday, but that's New Year's Eve.
Right.
So
yeah.
Anyone here have a life? I don't think that's a problem, Jeff.
Yeah, we're all on here on a Wednesday night. Yeah.
So if I could suggest, so I'm going to throw this back at throw this out to staff. Can I suggest that any task force recommendations be in by the 24th, so that staff then have the week of the 27th? I don't know. Do you guys have staff availability on that last week?
I'm going to be honest. It's the holidays, and the number of people that need to review it. That's going to be a challenge.
Right. Well, and
What
also
about the end of January, the last week in January? Is that too far along?
Yeah,
Marty, can I ask a staff a procedural question?
Yeah.
At one point, these were two separate plans, and then with the obviously proximity and similarity of issues, we combined the church and the mosque. Would it be possible when we go into January to bifurcate the two, have a focused discussion on the church, get a vote consistent with the motion to recommend advancing the church? Therefore, if it advances, our good friends at Wesley can actually get started. And then we can consider any additional language changes that may be appropriate for the mosque based upon, obviously, you having to get that information and feed it in. We're going to be using the same basic language, so I'm sure we're really kind of fine tuning around the amendment edges.
That's the approach. That's the approach, Bill. And for clarity, they are still two separate amendments. Our analysis that we've shared to you all is very similar because of their proximity.
Right.
But it would be two separate recommendations from this group. One for the
so we could go forward in early January, dispatch with the church, assuming we all, we come to some consensus, and then we can address the mosque's application at the latter January meeting.
Correct.
And our work, in my understanding, when we reconvene on the church, we will have the staff recommendation. There will be a motion to adopt that, and we will go through the amendments that task force members like to offer on that, and we'll see where we end up.
Yeah, and to Jeff's point about holidays and scheduling, speaking only for myself, as long as I can see it a day or two in advance, and we're not winging it and writing it on the back of envelopes, etc., I'm fine, because it'll focus the discussion and we can have a productive meeting on Wednesday the 5th, if that's the date. So I would be comfortable suggesting as task force members that if we're going to make recommended amendment language, that we have it to Michael so it can be circulated on Monday the 3rd. Michael, will you be back from the Caribbean by the 3rd?
I wish I was going. I'll be here. I'll be here.
The question is whether or not we want also staff to have time to be able to provide their analysis on that language as well for our input. So it's distilled.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's analysis. Jeffrey, you've got more experience from the luck on this, as much as it's obviously they have to analyze to make sure it's consistent with statute and consistent in tone with comprehensive plan language. But
yeah, sorry, I'm not using exact language. It's 9:30.
Is a lot of this stuff remaining able to be potentially discussed via email to coordinate the meeting date and stuff like that?
Meeting date for sure. Yeah, I still need to get everyone's
Yeah,
feedback.
but let me suggest that we agree that Bill's suggestion that the objective is that on Monday, the 3rd of January, Michael will be in the position one way or another to circulate to the task force and make available to the public, I guess, the amendments that task force members will offer that Wednesday to the staff draft.
That's fine.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work?
Yeah.
All right.
That works.
Very good.
We excited for maybe a magical motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
I motion.
I made the motion, Karen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Robert motion, Bill seconded.
Wait a second. We have a motion on, there's a discussion on the motion.
Adjourning? No.
There's a discussion on the motion.
The motion to adjourn is not debatable, sir.
It is not a discussion motion.
Okay. Anybody want to adjourn? Raise your hand.
Well,
aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll see you all on the 5th, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of get through this fairly quickly. We've identified some issues today that that make some sense and that we should take a look at, and hopefully we can reach a something that resembles a
Almost, Natalie, almost.
good, a strong task force position.
Hope everyone has a happy holiday.
Everyone, and have a great new year. Enjoy yourselves. And if anybody wants to take a turn,
Michael, does our per diem go up in 2022?
Good night, all. We motion. Bye. See you later.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
See you in the new year.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I guess I didn't need those forms.
It's okay. I'm glad we got it out the way. You have them, Jeff. I'm sorry I can never think of it until the day of, but we're good.